Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. As we've explored previously, police officers often face dangers, oddities, and bizarre occurrences that would leave the average person speechless. Among these experiences, some officers have encountered inexplicable events that defy logic, hinting at hidden sinister truths which challenge our perception of reality. These chilling tales rarely make headlines, either due to the officers' reluctance to share their experiences for fear of ridicule or because the incidents are dismissed as mere superstitions. However, despite their obscurity, these stories remain etched into the memories of those who lived through them. The following two stories are yet more examples of such accounts. The Long Corridor. Old buildings frequently amass peculiar accounts of ghostly encounters as an essential feature of their history. The building in this account once functioned as a crematory, witnessing numerous souls pass through its doors on their journey to the afterlife. The vast edifice featured extensive, narrow passageways, one notorious for alleged spectral encounters involving a figure at its hallway's end. This apparition was depicted as a gaunt, pale woman, with witnesses claiming to see her sobbing in place. On a routine night shift, two police officers had experienced what had been, up until that point, a fairly uneventful evening, until they received a call about potentially suspicious activities at this location. Upon their arrival, and after notifying dispatch, they commenced their patrol of the building. Observing the immense angular structure, assembled from poured concrete and steel beams, the officers couldn't help but find the building aesthetically dull. Given its scale, they decided to split up for greater coverage, maintaining radio contact. One officer wielded an outdated flashlight, lengthy and hefty, and emitting a meagre amount of illumination. Nevertheless, it was his best option on this particular night. The lower two floors had been stripped long ago, even down to the window glass. This naturally attracted curious teenagers and vagrants, although the officer wasn't overly concerned about encountering them. After several minutes of investigating the dark halls, a chill ran down his spine. He felt as though his imagination was starting to play tricks on him, causing him to envision a shadowy figure at the end of one of the hallways. Shaking his head to regain focus, he quickly convinced himself no one was there. It was a regular patrol, he told himself. By the time he had reached the third floor, his flashlight's brightness had diminished to about 30%, rendering the feeble beam virtually ineffective and leaving his surroundings almost entirely engulfed in darkness. Having surveyed the building on prior occasions, the officer believed he could navigate without the light. He switched it off, attached it to his belt, and proceeded in complete darkness. Attempting to find the staircase leading to the ground floor, he missed the doorway due to the labyrinthine layout of the building's halls and became utterly disoriented. Though aware there was nothing perilous within the building, getting lost was an embarrassing predicament he preferred not to disclose over the radio, which was accessible not only to his colleague but to the entire local police network. Eventually, however, his eagerness to escape the building's maze soon became his foremost concern, and he began desperately to try to contact his colleague. The officer repeatedly began to send a chirp signal over his radio, but received no reply. He continued to send the signal, hoping his partner would discern his predicament. Although during this, he suddenly noticed a noise radiating from close by. Halting his clicking, he listened intently, but heard nothing further. Resuming his radio attempts, he then unmistakably heard something for the second time. He ceased and caught the faint sound of what seemed to be like sobbing. Goosebumps covered his arms, but he managed to focus on the situation at hand. Eventually, after navigating the passageways by touch, he located the staircase to the ground level. Still in total darkness, and judging by the sound of his steps, he realised he was in yet another lengthy hallway. Placing his left hand on the wall and his right hand on his holstered weapon, he cautiously proceeded. Abruptly, he believed he saw motion ahead and halted, but nothing was there. Assuming his mind was deceiving him, he resumed walking, his footsteps clattering on the solid floor and reverberating through the corridor. Then he perceived more movement. He stopped and unholstered his gun, his heart pounding. He called out to his partner, but got no answer. He yelled ahead, warning the other officer that his weapon was drawn, just in case it was a prank. Still, there was no response. He advanced until the wall on his left vanished, and he glimpsed moonlight through an empty window frame. Believing it was his escape from humiliation, he entered the room, which felt strangely chilly despite the mild night. Just as he prepared to leap out, his radio blared in his ear. He had cranked the volume while attempting to reach the other officer and was nearly deafened by his partner, who exclaimed, "We got a jumper, Charlie's side." The officers had designated the building's sides as Alpha, Beta, Charlie and Delta to maintain clear communication. Realising the urgency, the officer scrambled out of the window but fell as his belt snagged on the jagged glass. He had to disentangle himself before he could assist his colleague. Finally free, he sprinted, hearing his partner through the radio imploring the individual not to jump. As he arrived at the designated side, he heard his colleague yelling and, having averted his gaze, not wanting to witness the person's fall. The officer, in a panic, dashed to his partner's location and found him distraught and pointing at the spot where the jumper should have landed, yet no one was there. "He jumped. I couldn't save him," the officer exclaimed, still believing he had failed to assist the man. "There's nobody there. There wasn't a jumper," the other officer reassured, still puzzled by the incident. "But then, who did I see?" To this day, both officers remain unable to answer that question, but the officer later recognised something that made his skin crawl. The window where his partner spotted the man was situated at the end of the hallway where his flashlight had initially ceased functioning. The woman in chains. This story unfolded about 20 years ago in the mid-2000s during an icy cold night in the city. A thick layer of frost had covered the ground and snow was looming. Such conditions typically led to uneventful patrols, as people, criminals or not, preferred to avoid the cold. At around 3 a.m, the dispatch operator received a call from a panic-stricken man, barely able to speak and in a seeming state of sheer terror. When asked about the issue, he shrieked that his sister was possessed and had attempted to extract his heart while he slept. He claimed to have fought her off, fleeing to the bathroom and locking himself in, petrified. The dispatcher promptly dispatched police officers to the address and connected them to the man so that they could hopefully develop a better understanding of the situation. The leading officer, a pragmatic man with no patience for prank calls, got straight to business and swiftly attempted to grasp the nature of the circumstances. "My sister is inhabited by a demon," the man whispered into the phone, hushed as if to avoid detection. "I'm sorry, sir, a what?" inquired the officer, unsure if he had heard correctly. "A demon that's been tormenting me for days. It escaped the chains." As the man spoke, the officer could detect scratching and pounding on the door. In his subsequent report, the officer admitted that what he heard next sent chills down his spine. He caught the sound of another voice, seeming to taunt the caller in the words of a foreign language, while relentlessly hammering at the door. He characterised the voice as low and raspy, akin to swallowing shards of glass, yet so deep and sonorous that it seemed to rattle items in the caller's bathroom. The officer couldn't help but experience a sense of dread, even without comprehending the words uttered. The officer maintained communication with the caller as he and his colleagues reached the location and forcibly entered the house. Inside, they encountered a sight that would later haunt their dreams. A gaunt, emaciated young woman stood at the bathroom door, and when the brother mentioned she had broken free from her chains, he wasn't exaggerating. A hefty chain was connected to a blood-stained handcuff on one of her wrists, clattering with every movement. Her body bore gruesome, self-inflicted scratches, and one of her eyes had a burst blood vessel, no doubt due to her frenzied state, making her eye socket appear fiercely red. Her tattered clothes and pale complexion led the officers to liken her appearance to a cadaver. The bathroom door was dented and clawed as if assaulted by a feral creature, with deep gashes from her fingernails where she had tried to reach her brother. Upon noticing the officers, she let out a chilling scream and lunged at them. Although there were 4 robust male officers present, they faced a challenging struggle. The woman clawed and bit viciously, battling them and screeching incessantly. Eventually they subdued her and transported her to a psychiatric ward, where she reportedly remains. When the brother finally emerged from the bathroom, he revealed the extent of the injuries she had inflicted on him. His torso was covered in gashes and blood, from where his sister had attempted to extract his heart using her bare hands. Many of the officers involved in the incident later claimed to have discovered their faith as a result.